Hello, and welcome to Inner Peace Counseling Services. I'm Dr. Angela Hargrove, and
This is Tasha Ganthier again.
And Sherry Green.
and we'd like to welcome you back to spend some time talking with us today, or listening to us, I guess, today. And we, unfortunately, are going back to the topic of the mass shootings in America. A couple of months ago, we had a conversation because we had a shooting here in UNC Charlotte. And, a lot of people was disturbed by that. And so this past weekend, we've had several incidences of mass violence. And it continues to permeate our society. And what we see in this office is a lot of anxiety and depression and fear as it relates to what's happening in America today. And so we decided we'd spend a few more minutes, we'd get back to the manifesto at our next Facebook Live. But we wanted to spend a few minutes just talking about the impact of mental illness on mass shootings. It seems to be that when a mass shooting happens, that everything turns back to mental illness. And we just find it frustrating as therapists to go back to this topic because it's the one area that funding is cut first in America, in our cities, in our country, across the country. That's the first thing to go. I mean, there's so many people whose mental health benefits have changed dramatically.
Significantly.
Yeah.
So that copays that were more affordable, $25 and $35, are now $75 and $90. It's ridiculous.
And whole programs have been cut. Entire programs that have been rehab programs or residential programs have been completely cut in a lot of cities and a lot of states. One of the things that have been most troubling to us is that the idea that the mass shootings can solely be contributed to a person with mental illness.
Right.
As therapists, as practitioners, we're finding a little offensive in that this perpetuates stigmatization of even being treated or diagnosed, because who wants to be treated or diagnosed if people are going to decide that you're necessarily violent?
Right.
And also, it perpetuates the idea of victim blaming. Many of our clients are victims of, and many of the survivors of these mass shootings, and in addition to the people that die, are now victims of.
Yes,
And
and
now
now will have a mental illness.
Will now have a mental illness. A recent study was done by the National Council on Behavioral Health, and they found that only 25% of the recent mass shootings or murders were perpetuated by people who are mentally ill. In fact, 75% of the mass shootings, there are other reasons for that.
It has nothing to do with mental illness.
Nothing to do with mental illness. Whether or not they're diagnosed with that or not, that's not the reason behind the behavior.
Right.
What this study found from the National Council of Behavioral Health is that ready access to weapons, this idea of permissive culture, relaxed restrictions on weapons, exposure to and desensitization to violence, and the prevalence of recreational intoxication had bigger contributing factors to this mass violence epidemic that we're dealing with in our country than mental illness had at all.
And I think if we add to the fact that a lot of times in this country, we just think we can do what we want to do. This attitude of me, that, whatever I want, I should have, leads to, well, I'm angry, I hurt other people. And so when we don't care about other people, we don't care about the impact it has to hurt someone. We just want what we want, and we want to strike out. And a lot of times there's people being persecuted. So they strike back out and they go bigger than the people that are persecuting them. And so it's just adding a cycle of violence.
Well, the isolation factor, when people unfortunately don't feel like they're part of a larger community. So whenever we have conversations of segregation and separation, it's historical. There's always violence. Because whenever people feel like they're separate from, rather than included into, they will become more angry and irritable and very, very violent in the face of their isolation.
And Angela mentioned a very important fact, and one that I feel very strongly about. I think entitlement breeds disrespect. That means what I want, what I appreciate, what is most like me, or what most meets my needs and wants, is more important than yours. So I don't necessarily have to respect your boundaries, because what is important to me has greater value than what is important to you, and has greater value than you as a human being. In the face of all this, our clients are suffering, right?
Yep.
Our country is suffering. We are suffering. So we need you guys to take an inventory on how these more and more prevalent recent violent episodes are impacting your personal wellness. So I wanted to say that there's some, you'll know it's impacting you more than you can bear personally, I think, when you find out that you're having nightmares, when it's impacting your daily life, like places that you used to find safe or that you used to not be fearful in, you're more fearful of. When you're more irritable, when your appetite or diet has changed, when you're more reactive to stressors that usually you weren't so reactive to, you could kind of let it go. And when you're fearful of things that it doesn't make sense that you should be fearful right now.
Yeah.
That's when you know that this increase in violence is impacting your personal wellness, and you should do something about it.
And I'd add to that just the fact that you can't stop thinking about it. You know, when I'm talking to people and they're saying, you know, that they keep watching it on the news or they keep listening to it and it's constantly on their mind. I mean, we shouldn't be impacted to the place where we can't focus on the things that is important to us.
And that's the early sign of acute stress.
Right.
You know, when you start having acute stress, it's the early signs and symptoms of also post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
So it's important for you, if you find yourself, excuse me, always thinking about an incident or relive.
It's important to really say, you know, okay, I need to put this aside. I need to stop exposing myself, because repeated exposure not only desensitizes us to the level of violence in this country, but it also continues to swirl it around in your mind. And that's where some of that reaction is coming to. So we need to interrupt it. We need to change to other things that we're watching on TV, or just cut the TV off altogether and engage in connections with others.
Yeah.
And I think it's also good to be kinder to people. Like, we have to remember we don't know what's going on in people's lives. And sometimes our reactions to people is just uncalled for. So we have to own our own behaviors when we're out in public and decide that we want to be better people just because we're going to be better people.
Period. Because we are truly, we say that we are, and one of the biggest challenges I have as, you know, a believer is that when we say we're a Christian nation and we say that we want to live better and take care of each other, is the idea that we don't see each other. And then the biggest challenge comes out of that, because if we do believe in practice and faith, we are supposed to recognize that God uses people, he doesn't use things. And if we're going to look at people when we leave our homes in a loving and kind way, and loving kindness is a practice of everyone, not just Christianity, but in Muslim traditions, in Buddhist traditions, and in everything that is wholesome and kind, we always must practice loving kindness. And loving kindness gives us room to grow. It gives us room to be visible. It gives us room to feel like we're a part of, instead of being separate.
And it also addresses our very human nature to fall into this idea of entitlement, which I again believes breeds disrespect and breeds violence. One of my favorite quotes, and I really can't remember who said it, is that you will never look into the eyes of someone that God doesn't love. Even if you don't like them, you will never.
Never.
I remind myself of that every day when someone cuts me off on the highway.
Yes.
That this is a person that maybe I don't love right now. I can't look at that person like God doesn't love them.
So we want to talk about what you should do to cope in times like this. And one of the key things is to recognize that there are steps to it. The first thing I think Sherry started talking about was a personal assessment, examining your personal self and how you're functioning through your daily life. And if your activities have changed, your activities of daily living, such as brushing your teeth, bathing, feeding yourself, you know, grooming yourself, and practicing proper hygiene, walking, being ambulatory, if all those things start to be very, very challenged because you're overwhelmed and distracted because of all these things, then you really need to ask some questions. And then in going forward, you need to focus on what to do to cope is also stationary to who you are as a person organically. The first thing is, what does my support look like?
Right.
How do I normally support myself in trying times? If you can't answer that, then you definitely need to come talk to us.
Right.
Because if you can't identify how and who supports you, we're going to have challenges there. And then going into that, you recognize your daily practices of things that make you happy, keep you sane, stabilizes you, and you move on into utilizing those supports and what they look like, such as your practices, your family, your social group, your pastor, your friends, and all these different areas of your life that you found support in before. And if there's nothing there that can help you with this, then you must ask for help.
Yeah, because we talked about before feeding our healthy side.
Mhm.
Feeding our healthy side with healthy social supports, healthy physical activity,
Mhm.
healthy food, healthy diet, having a healthy sleep hygiene,
Mhm.
sleeping enough. That's one of the first things that you'll notice if this the media and this increase in violence on the media is impacting you. Is it will begin to be difficult to sleep, to find rest.
And that goes back to what you're watching on TV. You know, we're always laughing because I'm the Hallmark chick. But I like watching Hallmark because it's just light and airy. So at times when things are heavy, because we've done this all day, or there's just things going on in my life, then I'm going to go to something light and airy. I'm not going to something crazy and violent in order to feel better. And so it's really looking at what you're feeding yourself with, the kind of things you're reading, the kind of people that are speaking to you. You want to have more positive things around you.
Absolutely.
Volunteer, like give back in some way, always makes people feel good.
Always. When you are able to, I forgot who said it, whenever you're able to help someone else, you realize that your life is not as bad as you thought it was. And you have more things to be grateful for. And then you give yourself some grace, and then also in turn give someone else some grace.
And it's always good to count your blessings. I mean, we say that lightly, but the reality is research shows that if you focus on what is working in your life more than what isn't working, you tend to feel better.
Or at least give it equal credit.
Equal
At
credit.
least- at least say
We'll start
the
there.
bad stuff is not more important than the good stuff that's happening in my life.
Right. And so again, if you feel like you need some help in this area or any other areas of your life, feel free to give us a call here at Inner Peace Counseling Services. We would like to help you. So until we speak again, have a good week, take care of yourself, and feel good.
Thank you.
Stay
Bye-bye.
well.